So, all right, let's dive in. So we're going to talk about best practices, best methods for handling water intrusion and leak issues. It's, tis the season, right? We have had a little bit of rain and we're starting to see some issues at development. So Ann and I are going to each tackle some slides. One of the first things I always look at from my construction defect background is when some manager calls me and says, we've got all these leaks at a project, what do we do? My first question is, how old is the project? And that may seem like an odd question, but truly, if you have a newer project that's under 10 years of age, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, but keep in the back of your mind, if you ever do have a younger project, there may be warranties where the builder will come out and actually make repairs and address the issue for you, right? So ultimately, what we want to look at, though, is we want to consider if you're seeing patterns, if you're seeing a number of roof leaks in one building or window leaks in one building, potentially there is a construction or design issue in play there for newer projects. Newer projects should not be leaking, okay? If it's under 10 years of age, you shouldn't be having these issues. They should be okay. So consider reaching out to legal. If you do have a bunch of water intrusion issues, we can then help guide you as to the builder's warranty process, make sure that you're making requests in compliance. Sometimes builders like to make you jump through hoops as to what form has to be filled out before they'll, return your call. But be aware that if a builder does go out on a newer project, those repairs do not toll any applicable legal deadlines within which to make a claim. So let's say you have a builder that's great and they come out and they make repairs routinely and you go and go and go. And then at year 10 in one day, a roof caves in or something, and it's because of a construction defect. Just because that builder participated in repairs and like went out and was responsive, it will not give the association more time to make a claim against the builder. So just keep these things in the back of your mind when you have leaks at younger projects. My last practice pointer on that is if you do have a newer project, builders are getting very creative. Builders' lawyers are getting more creative with inserting inspection requirements into the governing documents. Half the time we speak to boards and sometimes managers because we know you're busy and you don't have time to read the CC&Rs, cover to cover for every project. Even if you wanted to, sometimes the language is very, very vague. And so a lot of times builders' attorneys are putting in inspection requirements that you have to inspect the roofs quarterly or the exterior building envelope, twice a year, and note any potential water intrusion paths because they're trying to void the warranty if you don't comply with those pretty onerous inspection requirements. So take a look. If you have any new projects, let me know. I'm happy to check the CC&Rs and let you know if there's anything crazy in there about inspection requirements. If you have an older project, which I think you probably do, everyone has a bunch of those. One of the first things is we need to look at is, does the HOA have any deferred maintenance or repair projects? And is that the cause of the water? We'll get to what to do when you get a leak, reported. But one of the things to keep in mind is if you have deferred maintenance or repair projects that the association hasn't been able to fund yet, you're likely going to start to see, these buildings age and show problems and leaks, and it can cause so much more damage. So if you need help on an account that is just not willing to fund repairs and is like, she's got a magic wand or something. She's the special assessment whisperer. Like she gets boards to authorize money so that these projects can happen and you can take care of these buildings, because it's far more expensive, as you all know, once they start leaking, once there's damage, once there's the M word, mold, it's so costly for an association. So we want to prevent that. We want to stay on top of maintenance and repairs to the extent we can for older projects. Funding considerations, sometimes, if reserves are insufficient, occasionally we will need to consider a special assessment or depending on the type of leak, and we'll get to this later in the presentation, it may make sense to try to tender to insurance. And I know you all know there are pitfalls and pros and cons to doing that. So we'll talk about that in a bit. So the next thing I want to know is, what type of development is it if you've got a leak? Because, right, if you have a single family home project, there's probably very little that the association has, if anything, in terms of the exterior building envelope, that the association is going to be obligated to take care of. So if you have a single family homeowner give you a call and say, hey, my window's leaking or my roof's leaking, and it's a traditional single family home project where the association has no exterior building envelope maintenance obligations, you're going to be able to say, really sorry, I can give you some referrals to a roofer or a contractor, but the association isn't obligated to take care of that. I will note I did have a weird one once where the manager took a very hardline stance on, no, you're a single family home. We're not dealing with your leak complaint. And the owner was insistent, that someone come out and take a look. And what had happened was an association maintained sprinkler, landscaping sprinkler, was hitting the side of their building, and at quite a velocity of water, quite a volume was I guess being directed on the side of the building, and no one really caught it. The manager did their site walks, but the sprinklers weren't on at the time, and they felt terrible because they just didn't think that the association could have any responsibility. So that one was a bit sticky. So before you out of hand dismiss a single family homeowner complaint, just make sure you understand what the issue is, and let's, dot our I's, cross our T's, make sure it's not a random component that the association is obligated to take care of that caused the issue or contributed to the issue. If it's a PUD, like attached, whether it's townhomes or whatever type, of development you're looking at, the association involvement, as you know, is going to depend heavily on what your documents say. And let's face it, a lot of our governing documents that we see out there that haven't been updated are very vague, very ambiguous. It's sort of unclear sometimes who has responsibility for what. So I would involve legal if there's any question over who is obligated to fix what, because it can really vary from set of documents to set of documents. If it's condominium, obviously association involvement is very likely if it's at all involving a common area component, or even if a repair will require access or penetration into a common area wall. So keep in mind, what we're going to mostly talk about today are the latter two types of developments, because those are the ones where you guys have the most stress and anxiety in dealing with complaints received. All right, so I'm going to give you just a brief rundown, and then we're going to take each of these points point by point. So don't think I'm glossing over it. We're going to take each one of these in more detail. So my first recommendation is, obviously we have to take these complaints seriously. I originally created this PowerPoint slide and plan probably 10, 12 years ago, because at the time, mold, for any of you who've been in the industry for more than 10 years, if you've been in the industry a long time, mold was never a big deal. It was get some bleach, spritz it on there. There's mold everywhere. Just take care of it. And then about 15 years ago, maybe, there was that whole black mold. The media jumped on it. If you remember, Sandra Bullock had a construction defect suit for her house in Texas because she had all this mold, and it was this whole thing. Oh, a celebrity has mold, the world's ending. Look, the first thing, I always tell managers is we do have to take them seriously, even if it's the number one complainer at the HOA and they complain every week about something. You can't dismiss a complaint from them just because they always complain. So we do have to take it seriously. We do have to have a plan for investigation and determination of who's responsible, who's going to pay for it, and what needs to happen. So take it seriously. It is important. And if these complaints are sort of ignored or there's a delay in response, it can get out of hand very quickly. Pre-select vendors. You guys have a great maintenance, like I'm sure you've got access to the best contractors out there. But sometimes it's helpful to have a plan of who you're going to call when you start to get these calls. For a roof leak, you've probably got a roofer on speed dial in the rainy season who can go out and tarp or take temporary measures if it's safe to do so. So have some vendors in mind so you can get your action. You can get your plan in action very quickly. Have a plan for board decisions, right? Sometimes these are going to be emergencies. Sometimes they might not be emergencies, but have a plan for how you're going to communicate in light of the Open Meeting Act and how you're going to get decisions. Sometimes managers have emergency authority, essentially, to incur up to a certain amount to address issues and problems. So just keep that in mind. Here is the one that's going to, this always gets managers, what? They don't love this, but this is after dealing with probably over a dozen, if not more, personal injury lawsuits brought by tenants or homeowners that have cost associations hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. My litigation averse, the most conservative course of action you can take is you get rid of the evidence. You get rid of the mold immediately. And then you figure out with your experts what was the source and who's responsible. And we're going to talk more about that. I know that gets managers' hackles up. I know you guys don't love that, don't necessarily love that. But I have seen so many lawsuits. It is absolutely devastating to an association financially. A lot of times, more often than not, insurance declines coverage because they'll have fungal or mold exclusions. And we'll get into some more details on this. But my 2 cents is you get rid of it immediately, and then you figure out who's to blame, who's going to pay for it, and you do a reimbursement assessment if you need to. My next one is also, it makes boards and managers cringe because of the potential cost. I always recommend to clients they consider relocating. If someone has gone, if you have sent someone in and they can see mold, or the homeowner sends pictures and you see an entire wall is black, or you can see the mold, right? There's no question it's there, it's bad. We may not know what caused it. We may not know the water source. We may not know what to do with it yet, how to fix it, how to remediate it. I always suggest a board offer to relocate the residents. Here's why. If they're not there, they can't be exposed to it. They can't be cultivating a personal injury lawsuit against either the management company or the HOA. If they're not there breathing the air, guess what? They're not exposed. And it always looks good later on to a judge or jury that the offer was made. If they decline the offer, oh, I don't want to go live in a hotel. That's no life. I don't want to do that. Okay. I mean, you made the offer. You can't force them out necessarily. So consider making the offer of relocation just in case. The next bit, we'll talk about perform clearance testing after the remediation. I won't go into that now. We'll cover that. In more detail on the slide. Obviously, the whole goal when you find a leak, you want to identify the source of water or moisture and correct it before there's a mold issue, right? We don't even want to get to the point where there's mold. We want to identify the source and deal with it. And then last, but obviously one of the most important facets of this discussion is we determine the responsibility for repairs. Is it the homeowner? Is it the association? Is it a combination? It's possible, right? Every situation has different variables. And so we want to ensure the repair is timely completed. So you also don't face more claims from homeowners that, they haven't been able to use their kitchen in 6 months and they are entitled to $1 million, in damages. So we've seen it all. So next slide, we'll go into a little more detail. Taking it seriously, our whole goal is to prevent litigation, right? We're trying to prevent more costs, more damages to the HOA. We want to mitigate the association's liability, if any. So as soon as you get a complaint, I would involve general counsel, especially if an owner says they're having breathing issues, they have a new baby, they have an elderly, they're taking care of their mom or dad in their home. If an owner raises that, you can absolutely treat that as a huge red flag. They are concerned, maybe not concerned enough to sue yet, but if everything doesn't go well, or heaven forbid someone passes away, whether it's related to the mold or not, right? We had one senior citizen die during a mold remediation, and there was a huge lawsuit over it, even though there was no causation or proof that the mold had any contributing factors to their passing. So we want to take extra care when dealing with, senior citizens, kids, sick or immunocompromised residents, pregnant residents, litigious residents. And the third bullet point there, one of the, I wouldn't say common mistakes, but one thing we see a lot is when this does go into, if it goes into a lawsuit and we're collecting all the emails, a lot of times we see managers giving opinions in an email. Well, if it's this, that's not our responsibility. So we're, and they just, they have that information in an email. Be very, very careful about giving any sort of opinion on what the source of the leak is, or why the mold is there, if there is mold already, without legal or vendor input. The other reason to call us is we immediately contact the vendor, because we want to make sure they don't put anything stupid in writing, right? Like, we want to know the truth. We're not trying to hide anything. We want to know the actual source, but sometimes the vendor puts way more information in to their report than we need, and it hurts the association later on. So if you involve legal at the beginning, we can sort of chart the course appropriately to mitigate exposure to the association in the event there is a lawsuit. All right, next slide. So the pre-selecting of vendors, we don't need to spend a ton of time on this. A lot of times you will need a certified industrial hygienist. Those are the guys that run out and test the air after the remediation. Because if you can see mold or smell mold, we know it has to be remediated. We'll talk a little more about, I am a total geek when it comes to this, and I've read a lot of articles and studies on mold because I've dealt with so many lawsuits, but you're probably going to want to have a certified industrial hygienist that you can contact for a clearance certificate, which essentially shows that the unit is habitable, it's clear, the air is fine, no one's going to be sick. You'll need your mold remediation contractor, and these do have special licensing. It's not just your regular general contractor. They have to have a special certification, essentially. And depending on the source or where you think the water is coming in, you might need plumber, roofer, other vendor, contractor. And sometimes, if it's very complicated, you may need an architect or engineer. So that's just, you probably don't need to pre-select your architect or engineer, but I definitely have someone in mind in terms of your plumber, roofer, contractor, and your mold remediation contractor. Obviously, they need to be licensed and insured. You guys have internal controls and guidelines. Collins is great about working with really good people, so keep that in mind. And then obviously, having some experience in dealing with common interest developments is always preferred, because a lot of times if you get a vendor that doesn't understand what a condo or townhome or differing CC&R obligations, maintenance obligations, they'll confuse the issue and tell a homeowner something about, they'll just make, some comments that perhaps are not helpful. So we want to avoid that. All right, next, have a plan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You guys know all this stuff already, but if it is a true emergency, then obviously, Davis Sterling Act, you can hold an emergency meeting instead of a regular meeting. If we need to go back to this, we can go to this, but there's a lot more to cover, and I'm taking already more time than I told Ann I would need. So let's keep going. Okay, remediate the mold ASAP. So here's the deal. Mold can begin to grow within 24 hours of water coming into contact with either framing, sheetrock. It needs like a food source, right? So wood framing and sheetrock, water loves it, mold loves it. And I won't get into all the different types of mold in this presentation because I would bore you to tears. But depending on the species of mold, depending on what kind of mold we're talking about, it may not be visible to the eye though for 18 or more days. So that gives you some time, right? If you see mold on a wall, that did not grow overnight. It can start to grow, but usually it is not visible for at least, a couple of weeks. So keep that in mind. If you can see a big old wall that's covered in black or green or all the shades of, gray, 50 shades of gray, no, kidding. It's everywhere. You know that is not a new leak, that is a leak that has been going on for a very, very long time. So that also is very concerning. So why remediate right away? You basically, look, no lawyer is ever going to tell you to destroy evidence except in this situation. You want to destroy the mold, get rid of the mold, because you are cutting off personal injury claims if you address it, remediate it, get that unit cleared by that certified industrial hygienist, right? Because then if they're living there, they can't be like, oh, I'm breathing this terrible air, I'm going to die, I'm going to sue all of you. You want to get rid of it. You want to mitigate that liability. Next, this is very important. Some people think you have to test for the kind of mold to know how to remediate it. No. Don't get that report, because if you call that potential evidence to support a personal injury claim later, they're going to demand that report in discovery. They're going to get that report 99% of the time. And if it's like the bad mold, they're going to panic and maybe consult a lawyer. Do not test for it before. If you can smell it or see it, remediate it. That's my rule. If you walk in and that odor hits you, anyone that's ever dealt with one of these situations knows you can smell it when you walk in, or if you can see it, it's got to go. That way, remediation restores habitability. It refutes claims of the owner that the unit is not habitable. We had one, Ann and I had a weird situation. I won't bore you with a ton of war stories. And this was actually, it was a toilet overflow. It was not a leak in the traditional sense, but the owner said they were handling it. They had their claim into the insurance. We find out months later, they moved to the Four Seasons and ran up like $100,000 hotel bill, and then wanted the HOA to pay for it because they claimed it wasn't habitable. And no insurance company had stepped in and gotten it remediated. There was some miscommunication. That's why it's always important to keep legal involved. Ultimately, that case settled for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think, was it $750,000? $750,000 this guy got for a toilet overflow. Anyway, not all from the association. Let me be clear. Insurance did step in on that one, but I think the association did have to pay a small amount, and the deductible. So get it cleaned up, get it taken care of, involve legal. You do not want to have a lawsuit like that come down the pipeline. So, and then inform parties, this is also very important. You're not making a promise by going out and remediating it that the association's paying for it. We have like a standard letter we use when legal's involved that says, hey, we're going to take care of this for you. But if we find out that it is an owner responsibility, you will be billed back, essentially. So you want to make sure that you are kind of giving them a little bit of a heads up. We're happy to take care of this for you. Or if there are reasonable grounds that it is the association's responsibility or likely to be the association's responsibility. Again, if it's a single family home, ignore that. You do not need to run in and remediate every bit of mold in a single family home. All right, Anne, I really am speeding up, I promise. Consider relocating. Again, it depends on the facts. If it's a condo, if it is clearly a leak or water intrusion stemming from a common area source, and you're reasonably confident that's what's leaking and it is an association responsibility, then 9 times out of 10, I would probably say if it's severe enough or it impacts a kitchen or the only bathroom, make the offer of relocation. Or if it's a huge furry wall full of mold, make the offer of relocation. Anyone that's seen a mold remediation knows it is they tent it. There's a loud air scrubber they run, HEPA filter. It is disruptive. It is not easy to live in a unit that has that. And if you have a potentially litigious homeowner, they will come after you. The other reason to offer relocation is you get to dictate the terms. You can say the association will pay up to 10 nights at this hotel. Don't put them in some flea bag, terrible bed bug ridden hotel, but that way they're not going to the Four Seasons and sending a bill. You dictate the terms and the costs so that you can control those costs. A few grand on a hotel bill is it's a lot better than getting hit with a lawsuit. All right, next slide. And then I think this is my last one, Anne, and
Okay.
I'll turn it over to you. And we have tried to save some time for your questions. I know there were a few questions at the end, so we'll get to those. So here's why I always say perform the clearance testing after you remediate, right? You want to get rid of the mold. You want to clean it all up. You want to scrub the air, filter the air, get it all pristine in there. And then you do the clearance testing. All right. The clearance testing involves the certified industrial hygienist coming out. They sometimes, they'll take air samples inside the containment enclosure. So let's say you had a window leak and the certified industrial hygienist will tent, put like heavy duty visqueen or plastic around that, clean it all up, remove sheetrock, insulation, whatever's impacted, whatever could be growing mold. They'll remove those components, they won't put it back yet because you want to get the clearance testing first to make sure, oh, you caught it all, you got it all, you cleaned it up appropriately. Now we can start to do the put back repairs. The reason you want to take that after is it ensures, one, that the mold has been fully remediated. It clears that unit as being safe, right? That the homeowner can come back or the homeowner cannot worry about it. And it also ensures that you're not doing that testing too early and creating evidence for a personal injury claim. Because that homeowner, let me tell you, if you do the report first, they will demand a copy. They'll be like, well, we want to know. What did you find? Oh, don't worry, we're going to clean it up. No, we want to know. I mean, we've dealt with a number of those situations. It's just easier if you smell it, see it, clean it, and then take the clearance testing so that you can prove later if there is a lawsuit, the unit was cleared for habitation, it was safe. The homeowner's claims are ridiculous or speculative. They have not been damaged by this mold. So wait until after your remediation to get that hygienist out there to clear the unit. All right, Anne, I think the next slide was you.
Yes. So determining the source of the leak, of course, before you, the association, if it's involved, starts closing walls and doing the repairs, the leak itself or the water intrusion issue needs to be addressed. A lot of contractors are pretty good about, letting the manager know that they can't close it up because it hasn't been determined where the water is coming from. But sometimes they just do whatever they're told, and they're eager to close things up and do the repairs, paint everything. But again, if there are, questions about where the water is coming from, and this usually comes up when there's multiple sources of water intrusion, and it gets really complicated where the water is coming from. It's not just a matter of a toilet backup or a window leak, then you may need to get an architect or some other design professional involved. And as Julie mentioned, that's something that legal can help you find. This is probably in situations where legal is already involved or should be involved if they're not. So these are the sticky, weird situations where it's not clear what caused the water issue. Again, the investigation needs to be either conducted or verified with a licensed vendor with expertise on the leak. Don't just always rely on what the homeowner tells you. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. They left the faucet on, the tub, shower, and there's a leak from that, but sometimes it's not clear. And even if they do provide the association with a report from their plumber, in some situations, for example, like a leak in the piping, some weird issue or leak from a window, you may need to have the association's vendor at least go out and confirm that that is in fact the source of the leak. Julie talked about having a conversation first about, the cause of the leak or water intrusion with a vendor, because sometimes they put things in writing that aren't helpful. And some of those things later you'll have to clean up because it's something that the board is relying on or management is relying on, but it's actually either incorrect or just not helpful in the situation. When we're talking about who is responsible for what, this is related to the last slide because what I was thinking in my head is there are I see a few vendors, plumbing vendors particularly, that associations work a lot with. And they think it's helpful to put in their report who's responsible for what. Like, plumbing leak in this section of the piping that is exclusive to the homeowner's unit and therefore the homeowner's responsibility to repair, something like that. It's funny, but I see that quite often from a couple of vendors that are used by a lot of associations. And it's not helpful because, as you probably know, determining responsibility, especially in condos or townhomes, is a lot of it is based on what the governing documents say. So just because, for example, a blockage or a leak is attributed to section of piping that's exclusive to a particular unit, that doesn't mean the association is not responsible, because sometimes the documents, say something else. So leave that legal opinion to your legal team to provide. So that shouldn't be in invoices and things like that. That should be, coming from legal. And, if it's a matter of communicating owner responsibility for a particular leak, that's something legal can assist with. And then if the association is notified of a leak or water intrusion issues and the association isn't even responsible, for example, an owner to owner issue, there's no dispute that one owner caused damage to another unit, and you're aware of it because they made you aware of it, and there's no common area issues, the association should still monitor and make sure it's completed in a timely fashion. I would not just let the homeowners deal with it on their own. Usually documents in the architectural article does say something about repairs needing to be completed within 90 days or within a certain amount of time, so that things are just not opened up for, several months or over a year. And especially where, the common area is exposed, you would want to make sure that the homeowner is dealing with it in a timely fashion. When we're looking at who's responsible for a leak or water intrusion, part of what we looked at is, the CC&Rs and whether they have what we call a Marie Antoinette clause. It's we call it a Marie Antoinette clause because it's based out of a case where the association's name had Marie Antoinette in it. And that is where the court held that these exculpatory clauses in governing documents are enforceable. So this is typically the language we have in documents when we update CC&Rs. You'll probably see very, very similar language to CC&Rs that were recently updated, but it's basically to protect the associations in situations where the association was not grossly negligent. It basically says that the association is responsible for maintaining, repairing, replacing their separate interests unless caused by the gross negligence of the association. And so that basically shifts the risk and the burden on homeowners, even if the leak is caused by an association maintained component. So it basically says, even if the association's roof causes a leak in a unit, the owner is going to be responsible for maintaining and repairing and replacing the portions of the unit that was damaged. And although it's a lot of homeowners don't like this when we amend documents or suggest that it be added to an association's documents, it's actually too helpful to homeowners because it reduces the number of insurance claims that need to be opened, the association's involvement in repairs of interior components, and it's basically just shifting that cost because what homeowners need to be reminded is if the association is involved in doing all these things, they are essentially paying for that in their regular assessments or a special assessment. So this just makes sure everybody is responsible. They should be getting insurance to cover these type of repairs, but it's something that's helpful for associations. And even in situations where, we talked about that it is recommended that the association step in, remediate mold, and do these things to get rid of the mold inside homeowners' units or their homes. Even with this clause, we would not recommend that the association just, take a step back and let the homeowner do everything for the reasons that Julie talked about eliminating or mitigating the claims of a homeowner. So, but this allows the association a little bit more flexibility, or sometimes if they do a reimbursement assessment later on or ask for contribution for the interior repairs they did, this provision is helpful for that. So
can I just jump in there? Yeah. This clause is great, right? We all love when we see this clause, but that's why getting legal involved at the beginning is important, because we can initially check and see, okay, is this going to fall to the homeowner? But if we have someone who, in response to the association's letter that says, thank you for letting us know, but hey, per this section in your governing documents, you're responsible. And they say, I'm not doing it. I'm not cleaning it up. At some point, the association has to make a determination what makes more sense. Do you let that person live in mold and then set you up for a personal injury suit on top of that? Or do you go in, clean it up for them, and then do a reimbursement assessment back and recoup the money? Because we have seen homeowners just refuse to make repairs. And the problem is that later, when this goes to court, even with this clause as protecting the association, we cannot guarantee a judge is going to automatically enforce it in every circumstance, right? Like 100% of the time, the owner is going to, it's going to be on the owner. Depending on the circumstances and depending on how sympathetic that homeowner is, right? Senior citizen, a single mom, whatever it might be, the association could still end up getting involved in protracted litigation, all while the mold's getting worse, all while the people are still being exposed, getting sicker, plumping up their personal injury claims. So it really is something where you need general counsel to guide you as to, here are the risks if you just rely on this. Don't assume it's a slam dunk and that the association's not going to still get dragged into litigation. That's why I still always say, even when you have this Marie Antoinette clause, if you are not confident they're going to deal with it, we need to address it, or you're going to get sued anyway. And the mold will still be there, right? The mold will still be there, getting worse, could impact common area, could impact, structural integrity, depending on the size of the leak or the degree of the leak. So the association doesn't get a free pass. The association doesn't get to just turn a blind eye if they have this clause. That's the only thing I wanted to make sure you understand. It's not a free pass necessarily.
And Civil Code 4775 is similar. It's helpful in dealing with certain situations about saying that the association is only responsible for the common area and homeowners are responsible for their unit, that the association is not responsible for relocation. That's all helpful. And it makes sense to enforce in certain situations. But again, certain homeowners, you're dealing with certain facts where there's potential missteps by the board or the association with regard to repairs, all of those things. It usually makes sense to offer relocation, a certain amount of relocation to a homeowner, and as well as the unit repair. So definitely work with legal to weigh the pros and cons of proceeding a certain way, and also the facts that could later hurt the association if it doesn't step in and make repairs quickly or offer some relocation costs to the homeowner. Other considerations when dealing with these issues is, whether to tender a claim for some of your associations where, they're on the verge of having their insurance policy getting canceled for having a lot of claims made in the past. They may not want to think twice whether to open up yet another claim and have it canceled. And then also, obviously the deductible is going to be an important consideration when boards are deciding whether or not to open a claim. Whether the association should amend their CC&Rs to include certain helpful clauses, especially for an association that deals with a lot of abuse of the association being, I guess, having a master policy of insuring all of the units. Sometimes you have certain problem homeowners, and it makes sense to have certain clauses or insurance provisions in their documents to discourage those abuses of the association's insurance. Also, we often draft these what we call water loss policies or claims handling policies, kind of just to help basically what we're talking about today, and provide a guide to management and the board of what to do when you receive these complaints. And in the policies that we draft, we also include provisions about who's responsible for deductibles, for interior repairs, for relocation, all of those things, again, to help in situations and for associations that get a lot of these water complaints, water leaks.
Yeah, and if I can just on that, we've been doing a lot of these. I think we're doing them as rules now, although we can do a policy. But we've debated, even lawyers debate on the best thing to adopt rules or a policy. If you have an association, condo or townhome, especially, and you do not have a set of water loss or water intrusion rules or a policy, you need to have one. It will make your life easier, like Ann said. So please reach out. We've drafted, oh my God, I don't even know how many the last couple months. But it's a good idea in the rainy season just to get that, because obviously if you do policy, you've got to get that out for the comment period. So bottom line, I would jump on it still. There's still time this rainy season to get that in place. So do a quick audit of your accounts and reach out for a proposal if you need one.
Yeah. We talked about CC&R amendments. Again, if you have certain associations where this is an ongoing problem, then certain changes may need to be made to the CC&Rs. Some of it will be related to insurance provisions. Just beware, sometimes I see managers advising homeowners that, because the leak was caused by the homeowner, and they admit to it, that the association is not going to open a claim. Sometimes some CC&Rs require the association to open up claims because they have a master policy, and homeowners are not allowed to get, additional coverage for components that are maintained or that are insured by the association. So just be aware of that. That is also an issue that would require legal to assist with, to review the CC&Rs, to advise whether or not it is mandatory to open up a claim at the owner's request. And so, let us know when you have that issue. And if you do, you may want, the board may want to consider changing their CC&Rs to change that. The other, I think some of you are familiar about challenges to amending CC&Rs. Obviously that whether or not you have an association where members are not very involved and it's hard to pass amendments to the CC&Rs. There may be ways around it, like petitioning the court, but if it's important enough, it may be worth it to go through that process. And we talked about the water loss policy or rules. Sometimes just that alone, before they even go through the process of amending the CCNRs, is probably what makes sense to help the situation. So just a summary of what we talked about today: mold complaints, even from homeowners who complain a lot about everything. If they use keywords, you need to get involved, take it seriously, investigate immediately. Work with reliable vendors who will give you the proper documentation to support the association, but also not say too much to help the association where it doesn't make sense. And then have a plan for prompt board actions, decisions, since a lot of this will need to be, a lot of these decisions need to be made quickly. Remediate the mold immediately without regard for who's responsible, and worry about the money later. But also make sure you give owners a heads up that, the responsible party will be held responsible for those costs. Relocation, it may not be required under the governing documents or the law, but it may make sense under certain circumstances. Perform the mold testing after the remediation. There's really no reason to do it before, even if the homeowner demands it, especially if the homeowner demands it. Identify the source of water and moisture, correct it before closing up walls, floors. Do that before completing repairs, and then lastly, determine responsibility for repairs, and make sure that repairs are done timely. This will usually require legal to be involved, and if you have associations that don't already have legal counsel to assist with these situations, please let us know. We'd be happy to assist. All right.
All right. So I think we did have a few questions come in. And do you have those handy, or